Well, welcome to Northern Lights Spiritual Center. Northern Lights Spiritual Center is a community of people dedicated to using spiritual and practical principles to create lives we want to live. Northern Lights Spiritual Center offers practical and spiritual tools to make positive changes in our lives. My name is Reverend Vaughan Amaré, and I am the co-minister with Reverend Mykal Amaré. And we lead into all of the consciousness and hard work of Reverend Pamela Grace Beatty, who is the founder of Northern Lights Spiritual Center. Also want to give a woohoo and shout out for Stephanie Scranton, who is our practitioner here at Northern Lights Spiritual Center. And just as an aside, a practitioner is a person with whom you can have a conversation and using their skilled listening and spiritual discernment are able to guide people towards healing and towards making changes and development in their life and in their goals. So if you're looking for that kind of support, Stephanie is a great person to lean into. I'd like us to start. Before we do the opening song, I'd just like to have us start with a little bit of a prayer. So I invite us all to just kind of settle into where we are and taking a deep breath in and breathing out. And again, breathing in and breathing out. I consciously acknowledge that life is living me. Life is living each person that is here. There's a life through all of the universe. And it is expressing, it is expanding, it is exploring. Each one of us is a center of life. Each one of us is a window through which life expands its understanding of all that is. I give thanks for this time together. I give thanks for the inspirations that occur. I give thanks for the thoughts that rise up. I give thanks for the spaces where we find ourselves. And I give thanks for the technology that allows our community to come together virtually. From this place of gratitude, I release this word. I release it to the automatic action of the law, which just is a simple, fancy way of saying, I let it be, and so it is. Please join me, if you'd like, in our opening song, In This Very Room, by Ron and Carol Harris.
And now we'll have a brief meditation. So during this meditation, I just invite everyone to try to get as comfortable as possible and to allow yourself to relax after that opening prayer and opening song, relax in the present moment. And I invite you to just bring to mind those people that you're honoring this weekend, through this Memorial Day weekend, because they have been and always will be a part of your life. So during this time, just remember. And now I just invite you back to the present and remember that you are here and now, and so it is. And the reading for today comes from Reverend Reverend John Palavovich, and it's called Waking Up on Memorial Day. I woke up this morning thinking of you. My eyes opened, and I immediately began the usual involuntary inventory of what I might do today, the assorted plans I have, what I'm going to eat, the ordinary tasks before me. All the family stuff and the bills and dreams and the billion unrelated thoughts already ping-ponging around inside my head while it still rested on the pillow. And almost in an instant, I became fully aware that I was awake and alive. I realized that I am here in this bed, breathing, feeling, planning and preparing to rise, to step into all of the waiting world. And that's when I thought of you. I thought about this day and about how you're missing it, about the other ones like it that you've missed before that I had never considered. I thought about how many of those days I took for granted or squandered, complaining or worrying or missing what and who was right in front of me. I thought about those who are missing you today, the loved ones and lovers who must settle for photographs and memories. It reminded me again of the unfathomable blessing of those who share my sacred mundane with me every day. It seems terrible, insignificant, almost insulting, to offer an easy thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Because honestly, it's all too much for me to even comprehend. I have never died for anything. I have never spent everything on behalf of someone or something else. I am awake and alive here in this morning, and you are not. And so I will find in those truths as fitting a reply as I can to you and to your life. I will live today as a response of gratitude. I will be fully present in this day and to those who share it with me. I will remember you, what you are missing, and those who are missing you. I will fight for the best version of this country that I can make. In some small way, as I run and plan and hug and laugh and eat and rest and do the act of simply living, I will remember that I am here. I will try to live well this day that you cannot. In this way, my very life will be a memorial day to yours. I am grateful that I thought of you today when I woke up. I know that I will see this day differently now. I hope that I will live it better. Thank you for opening my eyes. Thank you for waking me up. And so it is. And now we're going to have our pre-talk song, so I have to go here.
today's talk, the title is about empowering our Memorial Days. And there are three elements to enable us to do that. So I'm going to talk about each of these three elements. The first is remembering, the second is honoring, and the third is celebrating. Some people may be familiar with the story that I've told before about the creation of Memorial Day. Memorial Day was initially launched by women from the North and the South following the end of the Civil War. And these women wanted to acknowledge the men, the brothers, the sons, the fathers, who had died in the pursuit of their aims for the war. So that retelling, that story, is enacting remembering. What I'm going to invite us to do is to consider and to hold our memories with us. One of the things that can happen in this teaching practice, in religious science and the science of mind, you may have heard the advice, let go of your story. The only thing is that I'm going to take a step back from that. We can't let go of our story because a lot of times our story is woven in with our thoughts and our feelings. And the idea that we can simply push our stories aside actually becomes an obstacle, preventing us from doing what it is that we need to do. The trick is that our memories do not have to remain stagnant. And I'm seeing Tanya today on the talk, and as a therapist, she becomes a listener of people's stories. But the thing is, if any one of you have ever heard of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the idea is you can't know where something is without that discovery changing its location. And remembering our memories is the same kind of process. The minute we remember them, we have. The minute that we enter into the memory, we have the capacity, we have the power to change who and what it is that we've remembered. Just think about that for a minute. That rather than thinking that memories are these static pictures that we pull out of our brains and we look at them and we simply refamiliarize ourselves with them. In that process of remembering, we are changing ourselves and the subject and the object of that memory. When I was little and going to grade school, I worked really hard to be at the top of my class. And one of my classmates was also always at the top of the class. Stephen Vieser and I were the two people in St. John's. We're always getting A's. And I'll tell you, there was one time that I got a B on a spelling test, and I just broke into sobs. Now, what's the point of this story? The point of this story is that sometimes we can get so fixated on goals. We can get so fixated on a certain way of being that we have disempowered ourselves. We have wiped out our capacity to actively engage and to be in the world in positive, proactive ways. I mentioned Stephen Vieser because actually I went to one high school and he went to another high school, but then I switched high schools and went to the high school where Stephen Vieser was. And Stephen Vieser, he was number 1 in our class. I was number 4 in the class. So Stephen beat me out. The thing is that Stephen died 3 years later serving in the military. Stephen was honored with a commission because of how smart he was. And throughout our childhoods, Stephen was somebody that I looked up to or saw as the person to compete with. And then, by the age of 20, 21, Stephen stopped being around. And I pull out this memory because what is it like to have somebody that inspires us? What is it like to have somebody that pushes us? What is it like to have somebody that calls our very best? That calls us to be more than we would be on our own if we didn't have that other person. Now, I haven't spent a lot of time in my life thinking about Stephen, but today is a perfect day to honor his memory. It's a perfect day to remember the power that he drew forth in himself and that he drew forth in others. I mean, this was a guy who was so smart, he could have gone anywhere. I believe he was accepted in at Harvard. But he chose to go into West Point. He chose to go into the military. I can't say if that choice led to his death. I can't say that he wouldn't have died in some other way. But what I can say is that he gave of himself in a way that is exemplary. One of the things about Memorial Day and one of the things about Veterans Day is that we often look at those as days to honor and celebrate our veterans. What I want to do today with respect to our memories is to expand that notion. Sometimes we can put a lot of stock in the people who are formal fighters, the people who formally join a branch of the U.S. military. I'm asking us to soften the boundaries a little bit, because there are other people who fight on our behalf who are not in the military. Sometimes it's by choice, sometimes it's by action. My sophomore year in college, I spent it abroad in Ireland, and I had the opportunity. There was a scholarship that I could pursue, and I did pursue it, and I won it, to the Yates Summer School. The only thing was that the Yates Summer School was at the very end of August, and I had all of June, July, and most of August to try to figure out what was I going to do with myself. I ended up going to a prayer camp. It was modeled on drawing people from all over Europe. And one of the people that was there at this prayer camp was this German man. And he described how his participation at this prayer camp was a way that he was fulfilling the requirement in Germany everyone in Germany was responsible for either participating in the military or contributing service if their consciences prevented them from being in the military. And this was one of the first people who, for me, was really consciously showing about being someone who was standing up for peace, someone who was standing up for an alternate way to engage with the world. Now, I've talked about this before, but I want to bring it up again. Human beings have 3 responses. It's just there's this little part of our brain that triggers one of 3 responses. Most of us have probably heard of fight or flight. Something happens and we either get ready to just give them hell for it, or we want to make ourselves as scarce as possible, as quick as possible, and just be gone. The one that may be a little bit less common for people is the notion, we also have the thing of freezing. This is probably most evident in the little critter that plays dead. The possum. You know, we had a possum in the yard one time, and we were fooled by the playing dead. We thought, okay, now we need to get the shovel and get rid of this dead thing. Come back with the shovel, and the dead thing is gone. Magic resurrection. I bring up this notion of fight, flight, or freeze because there are different ways to engage with conflict. There are different ways to be present to it and to move with it. The significance of remembering fight, flight, or freeze is that when we hold that in mind, we're engaging in our memories and we're engaging in our worlds in conscious, deliberate ways. I don't know about all of you, but I know that I can certainly say that there are times that I have just been in habits. I've been in habitual ways of doing things, and I have not really been all that conscious of those habitual ways of doing things. One of the things that I've really valued and appreciated about science of mind teachings and religious science teachings is it has called me to being much more deliberately conscious of what I do and how I put myself in the world. So since those responses of fight, flight, or freeze are simply the way our brain lets us respond, holding them consciously and responding to them consciously is one of the ways that we empower ourselves. It's one of the ways that we can be deliberate rather than just falling into old habits. I was proposing the idea of softening our celebrations of others. A group of people that I really want to acknowledge today are all of the healthcare workers who day in and day out have gone to care for people with the coronavirus. And I think about some of the ways that people have engaged. There was a long period of time when these caregivers didn't have adequate equipment, where they were going in and exposed. One of the first people who went into the hospital ended up infecting 121 of those healthcare providers. Among those healthcare providers was a woman from Trinidad, and she passed away. She died from the COVID virus. And we've had a number of care providers who have given their lives in the care and in the delivery of service to other people. And if you step back a little bit from the healthcare providers, there are how many people in the grocery stores? How many people in what were considered essential workers who have continued to go and to care for others? The time that they're being acknowledged or they're being celebrated, it's been decided by some of the corporations that they were no longer going to get the extra pay for that difficult work. And I would propose that we each get to make decisions about our response to that. We might just blandly flee or freeze in the face of it, or we might take action on behalf of essential workers. We might send in petitions. We might make phone calls. There are lots of ways that we can engage, and we get to decide. We get to choose. And I would say that that's a means that leads us to the next step of honoring. The Memorial Day is an opportunity to honor people who have gone before us. Many people may remember the Tuskegee experiments. These were experiments that were done on black men, and they were exposed to syphilis, and treatment was withheld, and knowledge about the disease process was ignored. And this was in the name of science. I was reading an article, and I'll actually send the link to Mykal to send out to people. But the U.S. military had a terrible record in the Second World War of using men of color to conduct experiments. They exposed men of color to mustard gas in all sorts of manners. And these led to lasting, lifelong circumstances. And we get to decide now, how do we call and how do we seek justice? How do we honor the people who did this? Some of the black soldiers were describing how they just didn't have any freedom whatsoever to say no to participating in the experiments. They were just thrown into a room, the door was locked, the mustard gas was turned on, and then they got to watch what happened. And the experiment was to see, how would this be? And really, let's be honest, the reason for doing this was, how many men of color can we put in lines so that the white men in battle are left untouched? They did this with black men. They did this with Puerto Ricans. They did this with Japanese men. The claim was that they were looking for what the outcomes would be. I don't know that it takes a lot of thought to imagine that exposing people to neurotoxic chemicals really needs a lot of experimentation. I can tell you that before I read this article, this was not something that I was aware of. I knew about the Tuskegee experiments, but I didn't know that there was this work being done on mustard gas. And the U.S. military's response, this first got written up in 2008. They're like, well, that happened a really long time ago. Like, that somehow makes it okay. That somehow the fact that people in power were so willing to sacrifice other people calls to me why we need to honor people. We need to honor the gifts that have been given. We need to acknowledge and celebrate. We need to continue to call for justice. There are a remnant of those people who served in the Second World War who have never received anything whatsoever in response to this incredible sacrifice. In fact, they were told that if they told anyone about it, they would be court-martialed, dishonorably discharged, and put in prison. How do we uplift and honor and celebrate the people who were subject to that systemic injustice, to that systemic racism? I think many people may remember or know that I serve as a union rep with the Seattle Education Association. Over the past several years, I've been gone from the state of Washington and Seattle and Northern Light Spiritual Center because I've been a rep at the National Education Association Assembly, where the business of the assembly for the year has been discussed. I bring this up because many of the experiences that we have, for instance, Labor Day, is something that was advanced by unions. Were a means through which little people, an individual stuck in a huge system, was able to gain power by coordinating with other people. I can tell you, having served on the bargaining team a couple of times with the Seattle Education Association, our union voted to go on strike because there was no movement towards things that the workers believed were important. It was by withholding labor things could happen. It isn't always easy to fight. And I would say that Memorial Day might be another time to thank organizers, to thank people who have stood up against injustice, and to honor them, to acknowledge and celebrate what it is that they are bringing forward. And that leads me to the last point, the idea of celebration. When I was little, this was the time of year in the town where I grew up called Blossom Time. And Blossom Time was one of my favorite times because every year we would have a carnival come into town. And there would be rides, and there would be booths, and there would be food. And the thing was that it was just so different. The park by the river, which was normally just a place where some people went to walk, became this mecca, became this crowded spot where lots of people would come. As the name would apply, you could just take in all of the blossoms on the trees that were there, and you could celebrate that it was this different time. And this Blossom Time celebration always ended with Memorial Day. So the town where I grew up had two parades. It had the Blossom Time parade on Sunday, and it had the Memorial Day parade on Monday. Now, in hindsight, listening to the bagpipe players 2 successive days was probably not the ideal point for many adults who were in the town. But it really released and spoke out because it was just so different. I mean, how many of us really spend a lot of time listening to bagpipes? I mention this though because it was a celebration. A group of men were acknowledging their heritage. They were acknowledging this little practiced skill. Because really, how many parades could you possibly have in a year where you get to march for a mile playing bagpipes? I don't even know if they have bagpipes in the pride parades. I don't think I ever remember a bagpipe in the pride parades. How is it that we choose to celebrate? How do we celebrate the veterans? How do we celebrate the civil rights workers? How do we celebrate the essential workers who have operated our stores and kept things going? Kind of a big thing going on right now is the debate about wearing a mask. You know, there's one group, and you'll pretty soon fall on this. There's one group that are insisting that the freedom to not wear a mask is their civil liberty. And that anything that withholds their capacity to be civilly free is just an outrage. And it's a dire, horrible experience that is being subjected on them. I mean, I've seen signs. Your life is not more important than my individual liberty. Really? Really? And then there's another group which is saying, let's wear masks as a sign of respect, as a sign of honor, as a sign of saying, I care about myself, I care about you, and I'm going to do this. Now, Northern Lights is still holding our services virtually, not because it's the thing that we prefer to do. I mean, my God, if it was a matter of rights, I mean, let's get together. Let's be hugging and in each other's faces. But is that truly respectful? Is that truly honoring? Is that truly celebrating? To put people at risk? You may guess from my tone of voice that I don't think so. I think that a celebration needs to be rooted fundamentally in respect and love and kindness. respect, love, and kindness. Let's pause for a minute and just think about what gets engendered in us when celebrations happen. In my mind, isn't it about loving people? Isn't it about treating each other in a way that is more beautiful and more thoughtful and more caring than what we had before? So here's our homework for this week. And we can start today, we can start tomorrow, and you know the way homework works. Be kind and gentle with yourself about it. Take some time every day to remember someone who's done something for us that we appreciate and we respect. This may be a person who sacrificed their life by fighting in battle. This may be someone who sacrificed their life standing up for civil rights. This may be someone who continues to risk their life on our behalf. So remember, and that memory may be even our own actions. Maybe there are times that our care of others has put ourselves at risk. Be gracious. Let ourselves remember those things that we do on others' behalves. Honor. We are still alive. So we get to hold, through our memories, hold up others and honor them and respect them and tell their stories as a way of witnessing, as a way of saying, you are a great example. So my memory of Stephen Vieser, I get to honor him by telling the story of this young man who always inspired me to more, to being beyond what I was. And celebration. Celebration is not frivolous. In this time, when people are alone, when people are sitting or not, celebrate in a way that is loving and respectful, kind. It may be as simple as lighting a candle at a mealtime. It may be taking the effort to Zoom with someone or Google Meet with someone or FaceTime with someone or any other of the many virtual technical means there are. That a celebration can be whatever it is that we create it to be. I think about the celebration of Tayan creating masks so that there is beauty, there's more beauty in the world. So enjoy your memories, your honors, and your celebrations. And so it is. So thank you today for joining us at Northern Lights Spiritual Center on Facebook or Zoom. We'll be here again next Sunday. Next Sunday is actually Practitioner Sunday. And so we will have the joy of getting to listen to Stephanie Scranton. And she will definitely have more homework for us next week. Now, if you would like to donate to the center, please go to our website, which is our name, northernlightspiritualcenter.com. northernlightspiritualcenter.com. No tricky spellings, just Northern Lights Spiritual Center. And not even that English way of spelling it with an R-E, but standard E-R in the U.S. And then hit the donate button. Those of you on Zoom who would like to visit and talk about inspirations or responses or reflections are invited to stay for the post-talk conversation. And I'd like to close us with a blessing. So just take a moment. Again, breathe in and breathe out. And in this moment, I give thanks. I give thanks for this time together. I give thanks for the inspiration. I give thanks for those women from the north and the south who said, let us remember those who died fighting for their beliefs. And irregardless of what they died believing, the people celebrating them loved those people. So just allow ourselves to find a feeling of love, a feeling of cherishing. And let that feeling fill us up. And let that feeling expand beyond our bodies into our homes, onto our streets, into the city, into the state, into the country, into the world. Because I offer you the claim that love is limitless, that the extent of our feeling can reach to infinity and beyond. So send our love out. As we send love out, let us receive love back. That everything that we put out comes back to us. So as we bask in that love, as we allow ourselves to feel it, I give thanks for this time together. I say it is good and very good, and so it is.